That cosmetics company belongs to my daughter, not some ungrateful outsider who wormed her way into my husband's good graces. My stepmother Margaret shrieked, her voice slicing through the elegant restaurant like a knife. Every head turned to stare at me, champagne flutes pausing midway to lips, as the celebration instantly transformed into a public trial. My face burned with humiliation as I stood frozen, clutching my purse with trembling hands. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Alexandra Winters, and I'm a 29-year-old former marketing executive who never expected to be running my father's multi-million-dollar cosmetics empire. Just 40 minutes earlier, I had walked into the Azure, San Francisco's most exclusive rooftop restaurant, for Margaret's 50th birthday dinner with genuine hopes of mending our fractured relationship. It had been 8 months since my father's passing, and when her gilded invitation arrived in my mailbox last week, I foolishly believed she was extending an olive branch. I couldn't have been more wrong. This wasn't a peace offering, it was an ambush. Your father built luminous beauty for his real family, Margaret continued, stalking toward me in her designer heels as whispers rippled through the restaurant. You manipulated him when he was vulnerable. Her voice cracked with emotion that seemed almost convincing. I scanned the room desperately, searching for a sympathetic face among San Francisco's business elite. These were industry connections I'd been carefully nurturing since taking over Luminous Beauty. Retailers, suppliers, beauty influencers, and fashion magazine editors who had seemed to respect me. Now they watched with expressions ranging from shock to growing suspicion. That's not what happened, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. Dad's will was clear about his wishes. His wishes? Margaret cut me off with a bitter laugh. What about his wishes for his actual daughter to inherit his legacy, not some workaholic who barely visited him during his illness? The tears welled up in my eyes as her words hit their mark. I had been living in New York when Dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and yes, I hadn't immediately dropped everything to return to San Francisco. The guilt was something I carried daily, but hearing it weaponized in public was devastating. Behind Margaret stood my stepsister Sophia, her perfect features arranged in a mask of practiced grief. She'd never shown any interest in luminous beauty, while Dad was alive, preferring to spend his money rather than learn his business. Now she nodded along to every word her mother spoke, occasionally dabbing at dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. I always wondered how she got control, someone murmured from a nearby table. Didn't she swoop in right when Richard got his diagnosis? Another voice added. The room seemed to close in around me as more voices joined the chorus. Someone actually hissed. Within minutes, the whispers had become a wave of open hostility. I think it would be best if you left, Margaret said, her voice now calm with the confidence of someone who knew she'd won. Nobody wants to celebrate with a thief, as I walked toward the exit, legs shaking beneath me. One thought crystallized in my mind. I would not let this stand. Not tonight. Not ever. I made it to my car before the tears finally came. Sitting in the dimly lit parking garage, I clutched the steering wheel as sobs racked my body. The humiliation burned through me like acid. These weren't just random people. They were San Francisco's beauty industry elite, connections I'd spent 8 months carefully cultivating. Their opinion of me could make or break Luminous Beauty's future. My father, Richard Winters, had built Luminous Beauty from a single moisturizer formulation he'd created in our garage 28 years ago. When I was growing up, the lab was my second home. I'd helped name new products, participated in testing, and offered honest feedback that Dad always took seriously. He'd married Margaret when I was 16, bringing her and 14-year-old Sophia into our lives after my mother left us for her yoga instructor. While Dad was alive, Margaret had played the perfect corporate wife, But everything changed after his diagnosis 2 years ago. I remember sitting beside his hospital bed as he held my hand. "Alex," he'd said, his voice weak but determined, "you have the vision for this company that Sophia doesn't. She's bright, but she doesn't understand what luminous beauty stands for. You do. I've seen how you analyze the market, how you understand what makes products connect with people." He'd squeezed my hand then. "I'm leaving the company to you, and I need you to promise you'll protect what we've built." I had given up my executive position at a top New York marketing firm to honor that promise. At first, when the will was read, Margaret and Sophia had seemed to accept his decision with quiet resignation. But within weeks, the undermining began. Subtle, at first, then increasingly overt. Tonight was just the public culmination of an 8-month campaign to discredit me. As I wiped my tears, my phone buzzed with a text from Oliver Chen, my father's longtime friend and the company's legal counsel. "Just heard what happened. Are you okay? Call me ASAP." I dialed immediately, my voice still shaky as I recounted the evening's events. "This is completely unacceptable," Oliver said, his normally gentle voice filled with indignation. "Margaret knows perfectly well that your father was completely lucid when he made that will. We have video of him explaining his decisions in detail. She's contested the will twice and lost both times." "They all believe her, Oliver," I whispered. "Everyone in that room thinks I'm some manipulative gold digger who stole Sophia's birthright." There was a pause, and then Oliver asked the question that would change everything. "Do you have your laptop with you?" "In my trunk," I replied, confused by the sudden shift. "Good. Meet me at my office in 30 minutes. If Margaret wants to make this public, then let's give the public the full story. Every document, every court filing, every piece of evidence your father left to protect you from exactly this scenario." For the first time since fleeing the restaurant, I felt something beyond humiliation, a spark of determination igniting in my chest. "I'll be there in 20, I said, starting the engine. Oliver's office was still lit when I pulled into the parking lot of the sleek glass building in the financial district. The security guard recognized me immediately and waved me through with a sympathetic nod. Word traveled fast in this city. I found Oliver surrounded by stacks of folders and digital tablets. His normally immaculate desk transformed into what looked like a war room. His silk tie was loosened, and his sleeves were rolled up, a rare sight for a man who prided himself on perfect presentation. "I've been organizing these since your father passed," he explained, gesturing to the neatly labeled documents. Richard knew Margaret might try something like this. He was strategic that way, always thinking several moves ahead. As Oliver pulled files, I paced the office, anger gradually replacing my earlier shame. The plush carpet absorbed the sound of my heels as I moved back and forth, trying to process what had happened. "I don't understand why she'd do this publicly," I said. "She's already contested the will and lost twice. What does she hope to gain by humiliating me in front of the entire industry?" Oliver looked up, his eyes serious behind his frameless glasses. "Control. Margaret has always been about image and power. If she can't get luminous beauty legally, she'll try to make your position untenable by turning the beauty community against you." "She's succeeding," I muttered, remembering the hostile stares. "Not for long," Oliver replied, sorting documents into new piles. "Your father documented everything. The multiple times Sophia stated she had no interest in the boring cosmetics industry, the marketing courses he encouraged you to take while you were in New York, the weekend product development sessions you two had whenever you visited home." He handed me a USB drive. "This contains video testimony from your father explaining his decision. He recorded it 2 months before he passed, specifically to prevent Margaret from challenging his competence." I clutched the drive, remembering that day. Dad had been so weak, but his mind remained razor-sharp. While I'd known about this recording, I hadn't had the heart to watch it since his death. There's more, Oliver continued, tapping his tablet, to bring up a digital dashboard. Financial records showing how you've grown Luminous Beauty's revenue by 31% since taking over. Market analysis demonstrating how your New York experience has expanded the brand's reach. Employee testimonials about how you prevented layoffs when that major retailer dropped our line. The board meeting minutes where you proposed giving Sophia a creative director position, which she declined because it would be too much responsibility. I sank into one of Oliver's leather chairs, suddenly overwhelmed by the evidence he'd assembled. You've been preparing for this moment all along, haven't you? Your father asked me to, he said simply. He understood Margaret better than she ever realized. A plan began forming in my mind as I scanned the documents. Oliver, is that color printer of yours still industrial grade fast? He smiled, understanding dawning on his face. Indeed it is, and I have plenty of presentation folders with the Luminous Beauty logo. For the next hour, we worked side by side, organizing irrefutable documentation that told the true story of Luminous Beauty's succession. Oliver printed copies of court decisions, financial statements, and employee letters. I organized them into sleek presentation folders, one for each key player at the birthday dinner. As we worked, Oliver made calls to 2 trusted industry colleagues who agreed to meet us at the restaurant. These respected beauty market analysts would lend additional credibility to our presentation. This isn't just about clearing your name. Tonight, Oliver said as we finished organizing the last folder. This is about securing your position permanently. After this, Margaret won't be able to undermine you again. I checked my watch, just past 10:30 p.m. The birthday dinner would still be going, knowing Margaret's love for being the center of attention. You know, I said, loading the folders into Oliver's sleek electric car. My father always told me that in business, you don't just defend yourself when attacked. You respond with such overwhelming evidence that your opponent regrets ever questioning you in the first place. Oliver smiled. He would be proud of you tonight. I took a deep breath. Let's go. The drive back to the Azure was tense, my nervous energy filling the car as Oliver navigated through San Francisco's crowded streets. The presentation folders sat in the back seat, each one containing what felt like my entire life, my father's wishes, my hard work, my legitimacy. Remember, Oliver said as the valet took his keys, you're not just Richard Winters' daughter tonight. You're the CEO of Luminous Beauty. We unloaded the car, meeting Oliver's colleagues at the entrance. The 3 of them in their impeccable business attire created a powerful visual, like a corporate fortress around me. The same hostess who had watched me flee in tears now stepped aside with wide eyes, no longer questioning whether I belonged there. My heart hammered as we approached the private dining room doors. Inside, the party appeared to be continuing as if nothing had happened. Champagne flowed, expensive perfume hung in the air, and a jazz quartet played in the corner. The elaborate birthday cake still sat untouched at the center table. The moment I stepped through the doorway, however, a hush fell over the nearest tables. The silence spread like a ripple as heads turned and conversations died. Margaret stood near the cake display, wineglass in hand, looking triumphant. When she spotted me, her smile vanished. Sophia, beside her, grabbed her mother's arm, whispering urgently. "Ladies and gentlemen," Oliver announced, his authoritative voice carrying across the room. "Please excuse the interruption. My name is Oliver Chen, longtime counsel to Richard Winters and Luminous Beauty. I believe there has been some misunderstanding about the company's leadership that needs clarification." The jazz quartet stopped playing, every eye in the room fixed on us. Earlier this evening, serious accusations were made against Alexandra Winters, the rightful CEO of Luminous Beauty, Oliver continued. As officers of the court, my colleagues and I are here to present the legal and factual record. My legs trembled slightly as we moved forward. Oliver's colleagues began distributing folders to key industry figures, while I walked directly to the small stage where the quartet sat. one of the musicians handed me the microphone. 2 hours ago, I was accused of stealing my father's company, I began, my voice steadier than I expected. I was called a thief and a manipulator. I was humiliated in front of all of you. I paused, scanning the room. Some guests looked down, unable to meet my gaze. Others appeared confused, opening the folders with furrowed brows. My stepmother, Margaret Winters, orchestrated that scene, I continued. What she didn't tell you is that she has contested my father's will twice in court. I nodded to Oliver, who projected the court documents onto the large screen behind me. She lost both times because my father's wishes were explicit and legally binding. Margaret started moving toward me, but Oliver's colleagues stepped smoothly into her path. Before you hear from me, I said, holding up the USB drive, I'd like you to hear from my father. Oliver connected the drive to the sound system. The ID screen flickered, and then my father appeared, gaunt but clear-eyed, sitting in his home office. The room fell into complete silence as my father's image appeared. Despite his illness, he sat straight in his ergonomic chair, his once robust frame now thin, but his eyes still sharp with intelligence. Several people gasped. Some hadn't seen how ravaged he'd become in his final months. My name is Richard Winters, he began, his voice raspy but firm. I'm recording this statement on June 12th of last year, in the presence of my attorney Oliver Chen and Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who has certified my mental competence. The camera panned, briefly to show both professionals before returning to my father. I am the founder and CEO of Luminous Beauty. After considerable thought and planning, I have decided to leave controlling interest in my company to my daughter, Alexandra Winters. Dad shifted slightly, wincing with discomfort before continuing. I want to address why I've made this decision, as I anticipate it may cause conflict after I'm gone. His gaze seemed to look directly at Margaret, even though he couldn't have known she would be watching this recording at her birthday dinner months later. Alexandra has demonstrated both the business acumen and passion needed to lead Luminous Beauty. Despite her career in New York, she has spent countless hours learning our formulations, analyzing our market position, and understanding our industry. She has completed advanced marketing studies at my suggestion and has shown remarkable aptitude for product development. The video cut to clips of me at the lab with Dad, reviewing marketing plans, meeting with retail partners, moments I hadn't even realized were being recorded. My stepdaughter Sophia has been offered various opportunities to involve herself in the company over the years, but has consistently declined. When directly asked, she has stated, and I quote, "I have no interest in spending my life making face creams when I could be modeling them." The video then showed Sophia at a family dinner rolling her eyes and saying those exact words, followed by her declining a management training position during a recorded meeting in Dad's office. I love both my daughters, Dad continued, but a business must be led by someone who loves it. Alexandra has that love. Dad looked directly at the camera. I am of sound mind and body in making this decision. Dr. Mitchell appeared on screen, confirming Dad's mental competence with her credentials displayed below her name. The video ended with my father looking directly at the camera. I trust Alexandra to protect my legacy and the livelihoods of everyone at Luminous Beauty. As the screen went dark, I looked around the room. Many guests were now paging through the folders, expressions of shock and dismay replacing their earlier judgment. Since taking over, I said into the microphone, Luminous Beauty has increased revenue by 31%. We've expanded into 3 new international markets, launched our sustainable packaging initiative, and avoided any layoffs despite losing the Glamour Chain account. I nodded toward Oliver, who displayed the financial charts on screen. On page 7 of your folders, you'll find testimonials from our employees, many of whom have worked with my father for decades, expressing their support for my leadership. I took a deep breath before continuing. Page 12 contains the formal lie. Job offer extended to Sophia 3 months ago. a creative director position with significant authority, but less day-to-day operational responsibility. She declined via text message, stating she had better things to do than attend boring product meetings. I could see Sophia's face reddening as several guests turned to look at her. "The final section," I said, my voice growing stronger, "contains the court decisions rejecting Margaret's challenges to my father's will. 2 different judges found no evidence of manipulation or undue influence. The medical reports confirmed Dad was fully competent when making his decision." I stepped forward, placing the microphone down for a moment as I looked directly at Margaret, who stood frozen near the cake display. "You asked me to give back what isn't mine," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But as these documents prove beyond any doubt, Luminous Beauty is exactly where my father wanted it to be, in my hands." I picked up the microphone again, turning back to address the entire room. "I understand many of you were misled tonight. You heard one side of a complicated story and reacted based on incomplete information." I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the dining room. "I don't blame you for that. What I do ask is that you take the time to review the evidence in front of you before making further judgments." The atmosphere in the room had transformed. The hostility was gone, replaced by discomfort and embarrassment. Victoria King, the editor-in-chief of Beauty Now magazine, stood up from her table. "Alexandra, I owe you an apology," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "I've known your father for 15 years, and I should have known better than to accept such serious accusations without question." Her public acknowledgement seemed to break a dam. Other guests began flipping more intently through the folders, murmuring among themselves. Elena Santos, the buyer for Luxe department stores and one of our biggest accounts, slowly raised her glass toward me. Others gradually joined in this subtle gesture of support. Margaret finally broke through Oliver's colleagues' blockade, storming toward me with Sophia trailing behind her. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice low but venomous. "This is my birthday celebration, and you've turned it into a corporate presentation. This is exactly why Richard should never have left you the company. You have no class, no sense of propriety." I smiled calmly, knowing every eye in the room was on us. "Interesting perspective, Margaret, considering you used your own birthday party to publicly accuse me of theft and have me thrown out." "You manipulated him when he was dying," Sophia interjected, her voice shaking with anger. "You were barely even around." Oliver stepped forward, tablet in hand. "Actually, the visitor logs from the hospital and hospice facility show that Alexandra visited her father 67 times during his final 3 months. Based on these same records, Sophia, you visited 9 times. Mrs. Winters, you visited 23 times." Sophia's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "The company was supposed to secure our future," Margaret finally said, dropping all pretense. "Richard promised me we would always be taken care of." "And you are," I replied firmly. "Dad's will provided generously for both of you. The trusts he established ensure you'll never have financial concerns." I lowered my voice so only they could hear. "What he didn't do was give you control of his life's work because he knew what would happen to it if he did." Margaret's face contorted with rage. For a moment, I thought she might strike me. Instead, she grabbed Sophia's arm and began pulling her toward the exit. "This isn't over," she threw over her shoulder. "Actually, it is," Oliver called after her. "Any further legal challenges will be considered vexatious litigation, and we will seek sanctions." As they disappeared through the doors, the tension in the room visibly deflated. Guests began approaching me, offering apologies and congratulations on the company's success. Some admitted they had always found Margaret's version suspicious, but hadn't felt comfortable speaking up. Janet Pierce, the former CMO who had worked with my father for 15 years before retiring, made her way to my side. "Richard was right about you," she said, squeezing my hand. "He used to say you had your mother's creativity but his head for business." Tears pricked at my eyes. But they weren't tears of humiliation this time. Thank you, Janet. That means everything. To me. As the evening continued, I found myself surrounded by support instead of scorn. Oliver stood nearby, satisfaction evident in his smile. His colleagues began collecting the folders. They had served their purpose. What now? Oliver asked as the party gradually returned to normal. I looked around at the room full of beauty industry influencers, many of whom would be crucial to Luminous Beauty's future success. Now, I said, straightening my shoulders. I network. After all, I'm not just Richard Winters' daughter tonight. I'm the CEO of Luminous Beauty. 6 months have passed since Margaret's disastrous birthday dinner. That evening marked a turning point not just in how the beauty industry viewed me, but in how I viewed myself. Walking back into that restaurant with evidence and truth had transformed me in ways I'm still discovering. Luminous Beauty has flourished beyond even my most optimistic projections. After the dinner, several guests approached me with new partnership opportunities. Victoria King's magazine ran a feature on our sustainable packaging initiative. Elena Santos doubled Lux department store's order and gave us premier counter space in all their locations. 3 former retail partners who had been wavering returned with long-term contracts. Our workforce has grown by 27 employees, and we've expanded our research and development department into a second facility in Oakland. The clean luxury line I launched last month has already exceeded sales projections by 40%. The aftermath for Margaret and Sophia wasn't what anyone expected. 3 weeks after the dinner, Sophia showed up at my office unannounced. She sat across from me, nervously twisting the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist. I need a job, she said bluntly. Mom's gone through most of her personal savings on those legal challenges and shopping therapy. My trust from Dad doesn't fully mature for another 5 years. I studied my stepsister's face, searching for deception, but finding only desperation. Why come to me, especially after everything that happened? Because, she admitted reluctantly, you're the only one who's actually succeeding. Everyone else in Mom's social circle is just pretending. Against Oliver's advice, I offered Sophia an entry-level position in our product testing department. To my surprise, she accepted. And even more surprisingly, she's shown genuine aptitude for the work. Her experience as a former model has given her valuable insights into what consumers actually want from luxury skincare. We're not friends, and perhaps we never will be, but there's a growing professional respect between us. Last month, I even implemented one of her suggestions for our eye cream packaging, which has been well received by customers. Margaret, on the other hand, left San Francisco shortly after the dinner. She moved to Los Angeles, where she's reportedly pursuing a wealthy film producer. Our paths haven't crossed since, and I doubt they will anytime soon. My personal life has undergone equally significant transformations. For years, marketing strategy had been my identity. Spreadsheets and campaign plans my constant companions through the loneliness after Mom left, through the awkward blending of families when Dad married Margaret, through the grueling schedule of climbing the corporate ladder in New York. When Dad got sick and I stepped away from my executive position, I thought I was just taking a temporary break. But running Luminous Beauty has awakened something unexpected in me. The challenge of leadership, the satisfaction of creating products that actually improve people's lives and confidence, the joy of building something lasting. These things fulfill me in ways I never anticipated. I still analyze marketing trends and consumer data, usually late at night when the day's meetings are done. But my relationship with business has evolved into something more personal and less transactional. Last month, I did something Dad would have loved. I established the Richard Winters Foundation, dedicated to supporting women entrepreneurs in the beauty industry. The foundation also provides business mentorship to young chemists and formulators, combining both sides of Dad's legacy into something meaningful. At our launch event, I unveiled a new scholarship program for chemistry students interested in clean beauty formulations. As I presented the initiative in our original lab, the converted garage where Dad had created his first moisturizer, surrounded by the employees whose livelihoods he had secured and I now protected, I felt his presence more strongly than I had since his death. I realized that inheritance isn't just about assets and ownership. It's about carrying forward the best parts of those we've lost while adding our own unique contributions. The beauty industry that once whispered about me now points to Luminous Beauty as a model of innovation and ethical leadership. The company thrives, Sophia is finding her way, and I've discovered a new harmony between the marketing executive I was and the beauty entrepreneur I've become. Dad was right all along. Some legacies aren't stolen, they're earned. Last week, I received an unexpected package at the office. Inside was an old leather-bound journal, my father's original formula book from when he started the company. A small note was tucked inside. The front cover. I found this while cleaning out Mom's storage unit. I think Dad would want you to have it. S. That night, as I carefully turned the pages of his meticulous notes and elegant chemical diagrams, I found a folded piece of paper, tucked into the back. It was a letter addressed to me, written in Dad's distinctive handwriting. My dear Alexandra, if you're reading this, then you've successfully taken the reins of Luminous Beauty, despite whatever obstacles may have been placed in your path. I never doubted you would. I've watched you grow from a curious child who asked endless questions about my magic potions to a brilliant woman with the rare combination of analytical mind and creative spirit. This company needs both to thrive. There will be those who question your right to be here, people who will claim you don't belong. When that happens, remember this. Luminous Beauty has always been about seeing the true beauty beneath the surface. In our formulations, in our customers, and in ourselves. You've always seen the beauty in this company, even when others couldn't. That's why it belongs in your hands. With all my love and confidence, Dad. I pressed the letter to my chest, tears flowing freely. The validation I'd been seeking had been there all along, not in court decisions or financial statements, but in my father's unwavering belief in me. The next morning, I had the letter framed. It now hangs in my office. A daily reminder that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. Not because I'm Richard Winters' daughter, but because I'm Alexandra Winters, CEO of Luminous Beauty, carrying forward a legacy that was always meant to be mine. 1 year has passed since that fateful night at the Azure. The evening that began as a humiliating ambush ultimately became the catalyst for Luminous Beauty's most successful year in its 3-decade history. After finding my father's letter, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The validation I'd been seeking wasn't just about proving Margaret wrong. It was about honoring the vision my father and I had shared for the company's future. With that clarity, I was ready to take Luminous Beauty to heights even Dad hadn't imagined. The industry magazine that once questioned my legitimacy recently featured me on their cover as Beauty's rising force. The photo shoot took place in our original lab, with Dad's vintage formulation equipment carefully preserved in glass cases beside our state-of-the-art technology. The journalist seemed fascinated by the dichotomy. You've managed to honor tradition, while pushing boundaries, she remarked during our interview. That's rare in an industry obsessed with the next new thing. I smiled, running my fingers along the worn counter where Dad had mixed his first batches. Innovation without heritage is just novelty. The real magic happens when you build on foundations that matter. Our clean luxury line has expanded into global markets, with particularly strong sales in Asia and Europe. Last quarter's earnings report showed a 47% increase year-over-year, sending our stock price soaring. The market analysts who once whispered about nepotism now cite Luminous Beauty as a case study in successful leadership transition. More meaningful than the financial success has been the transformation within our company culture. The tension, that lingered during the months of Margaret's undermining has dissolved, replaced by a collaborative energy I've worked hard to foster. Our employee retention rate has climbed to 94%, well above industry average. The Richard Winters Foundation has already awarded 15 scholarships to promising chemistry students and provided startup funding for 6 women-led beauty ventures. Watching these young entrepreneurs pitch their ideas reminds me of Dad pacing our living room, explaining his vision to skeptical first investors decades ago. As for Sophia, her evolution has been perhaps the most surprising development of all. Her entry-level position in product testing gradually evolved as she discovered an unexpected talent for consumer insights. 6 months ago, I promoted her to Associate Consumer Experience Manager. "You actually understand what people want from beauty products," I told her during our evaluation meeting. "Not just what they say they want, but what actually makes them feel beautiful." Sophia had looked genuinely startled by the praise. "It's just something I picked up from modeling," she said with an uncomfortable shrug. "You spend enough time having people critique everything about your appearance, you learn what products actually deliver and what's just marketing hype. That's exactly why we need your perspective," I replied. "Most executives in this industry have never sat in a makeup chair for 8 hours straight." While our relationship remains professional rather than sisterly, there's an emerging mutual respect that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Last month, when Sophia successfully advocated for changes to a foundation formula based on feedback from diverse skin types, I saw a glimpse of my father's consumer-first mentality in her approach. Margaret, meanwhile, has made several attempts to reinsert herself into our world. Her engagement to the Los Angeles film producer ended abruptly amid rumors of financial improprieties. 3 months ago, she called, asking to discuss her financial situation. Oliver handled the conversation, reiterating that her trust provisions were generous but fixed. 2 weeks later, she appeared unannounced at our headquarters, demanding to see me. Security called my office, and I decided to meet her in the lobby, rather than have her escorted out, a scene that would only fuel industry gossip. "Alexandra," she said, her designer outfit slightly less pristine than I remembered. "I've been thinking about our family legacy." I gestured to the comfortable seating area away from the reception desk. "What's on your mind, Margaret?" "I may have been hasty in my assessment of your capabilities," she said, the words clearly difficult for her. "Luminous Beauty is thriving under your leadership. Even I can admit that." I waited, knowing there was more to this sudden acknowledgement. Wondering if there might be a place for me in the company, she finally said. "Perhaps in public relations or brand ambassadorship. I still have excellent connections in certain circles. The Margaret of a year ago would have expected me to jump at this olive branch, or more accurately, to view her offer as a generous concession. The Alexandra of a year ago might have considered it, desperate for family harmony." "I appreciate you recognizing the company's success," I said carefully. "But I don't think bringing you into the organization would be beneficial for either of us. Too much has happened." Her expression hardened. "Because you're still holding a grudge? That's hardly the professional attitude Richard would have wanted." I shook my head. "It's not about grudges, Margaret, it's about trust. Business partnerships require it, and we don't have that foundation." "So that's it? After 20 years as Richard's wife, I'm just cut out completely?" "Your financial support continues exactly as Dad arranged it," I reminded her. "But Luminous Beauty needs to move forward without the tensions of the past." She left without further argument, but the encounter left me reflective. Dad had always emphasized that the hardest business decisions weren't about products or profits, they were about people. Saying no to Margaret wasn't about punishment. It was about protecting the healthy environment we'd finally established. My personal life has blossomed alongside the business. The 70-hour work weeks of that first tumultuous year have gradually given way to a more sustainable balance. I've reconnected with old friends from college and made new ones in industry groups focused on sustainable beauty practices. 6 months ago, I met Daniel, an environmental chemist who consults with companies transitioning to greener formulations. What began as a professional consultation evolved into coffee discussions about biodegradable packaging, then dinners debating the ethics of certain preservatives, and eventually weekend hikes where we talked about everything but work. Last month, I finally took 2 weeks off, my first real vacation since taking over the company. Daniel and I traveled to Japan to visit skincare manufacturers whose multi-generational approach to beauty has inspired some of our newest products. The ancient temples and gardens of Kyoto provided perspective that no boardroom ever could. Yulao. Seem different here, Daniel observed as we sat beside a centuries-old pond. More relaxed, but also more focused somehow. I'm learning that stepping away occasionally makes me better when I step back in, I said, realizing the truth of it as I spoke. Dad was so consumed by the business that he never gave himself this kind of space. Do you think he would approve of how you're running things? Daniel asked. I thought about it, watching the koi fish glide beneath the water's surface. I think he'd be surprised by some choices and pleased by others. But mostly, I think he'd be happy that I'm making the company truly mine, not just preserving his version of it. That realization has been the most liberating part of this journey. The company that bears my father's creative imprint is now equally stamped with my own vision. Last week, we broke ground on our new research facility, a building that will house not just beauty labs, but also a consumer education center, sustainability incubator, and mentorship spaces for young entrepreneurs. At the groundbreaking ceremony, I placed Dad's original formula book, carefully preserved in a glass case, into the cornerstone. It felt right to build our future on the foundation he created, while ensuring that foundations support structures he never imagined. The night of the ceremony, I found myself alone in my office late, reviewing plans for our next product launch. The skyline of San Francisco glittered through the windows, a view Dad had always loved. On my desk sat a framed photo of the two of us in the original garage lab, my 12-year-old self carefully measuring ingredients while he looked on with pride. Beside it stood a new addition, a prototype of our upcoming packaging redesign. The sleek, refillable container represented everything we were becoming: innovative, sustainable, forward-thinking, yet still unmistakably luminous beauty. I picked up both items, the past and future of the company, in my hands. For so long, I'd worried about whether I deserved to lead Dad's company. Now I understood that wasn't the right question. The business wasn't simply Dad's anymore. It was ours. And increasingly, it was becoming mine. A text from Sophia interrupted my thoughts. Final consumer testing results came in. The new serum formula scored 92% positive. Even I'm impressed. I smiled at the unexpected alliance we'd formed. Neither of us had gotten exactly what we thought. We wanted a year ago, but perhaps we'd both found what we needed. As I packed up to head home, I glanced at Dad's letter, still framed on my wall. The words, "You've always seen the beauty in this company," stood out in the soft evening light. He was right, but not in the way either of us had anticipated. I'd seen not just what luminous beauty was, but what it could become. The intimidated daughter who fled the Azure in tears a year ago wouldn't recognize the CEO I am today. That night of public humiliation had forged something unexpected. A leader who understood that inheritance might provide opportunity, but legacy is something you build yourself, day by day, decision by decision. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, a potential acquisition to consider, sustainability goals to meet, competitors to outmaneuver. But tonight, looking out over the city where my father had built his dream and where I was now building mine, I felt a deep certainty that I hadn't just survived the storm. I had learned to navigate by the stars it revealed. Some legacies aren't stolen, and some aren't merely inherited. The best ones are reimagined, one brave decision at a time. 3 years have passed since that night at the Azure, when Margaret publicly accused me of stealing luminous beauty. What began as the most humiliating experience of my life has evolved into a defining moment that shaped not just my career, but my understanding of myself and what it means to truly own your path. Last month, Luminous Beauty celebrated its 30th anniversary with a gala event at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. As I stood on stage looking out at the hundreds of industry professionals, loyal customers, and dedicated employees who had gathered to celebrate with us, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we'd come. 30 years ago, my father mixed his first batch of moisturizer in our garage, I told the audience. He had no business plan, no investors, just a formula he believed in, and a dream of creating products that made people feel better in their own skin. The museum's atrium had been transformed for the evening, with interactive installations showcasing our journey from that humble garage to our current position as one of the beauty industry's most respected names. Display cases held artifacts from our history, Dad's original hand mixer, the first Luminous Beauty logo sketched on a napkin, vintage product bottles from each decade. What my father couldn't have known then was how his personal passion would grow into something that would touch millions of lives, create hundreds of jobs, and eventually become a platform for innovation that goes far beyond skincare. Our company had indeed evolved in ways Dad might never have imagined. Beyond our core skincare lines, Luminous Beauty had expanded into ethical ingredient sourcing partnerships with indigenous communities, pioneered biodegradable packaging technologies now licensed to other companies, and established science scholarships that had already put 63 first-generation college students through chemistry and biology programs. Legacy isn't what we leave behind, I continued, my voice steady despite the emotion I felt. It's what continues to grow because of the seeds we plant. In the front row sat Sophia, now our Director of Consumer Experience, a position she had earned through genuine talent and hard work. Beside her was her fiancé, whom she'd met at a sustainability conference where she was representing Luminous Beauty. The transformation in her from the entitled, disinterested young woman of 3 years ago was remarkable. Daniel stood off to the side, smiling encouragingly. After 2 years of dating, we had moved in together 6 months ago, merging our lives, with the same careful consideration we brought to business decisions. He understood the weight of responsibility I carried and provided balance rather than competition, something I hadn't realized I needed until I found it. After my speech, as guests mingled among the interactive displays, Victoria King from Beauty Now approached me, champagne flute in hand. "I was just looking at your market share graphics," she said, gesturing to one of the digital displays. 43% growth over 3 years is extraordinary, especially in this economy. "It's been a team effort," I replied, a response that had become genuine rather than modest deflection. "Perhaps," Victoria said with a knowing smile. "But teams need leaders. I remember when this industry questioned whether you deserved to run your father's company. Now they're scrambling to imitate your business model." I laughed. "Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, right?" "Indeed." She glanced around the room. "Is Margaret here tonight? I haven't seen her." "No," I said simply. "She wasn't invited." Victoria nodded, understanding the boundaries I'd established. "And how is the Richard Winters Foundation doing? I hear the mentorship program has been particularly successful." "It's been transformative," I said, warming to the subject. "We've supported 32 women-owned beauty startups so far. 3 have already secured major distribution deals." As I moved through the celebration, speaking with industry partners and longtime employees, I felt a deep sense of alignment that had been missing in those early days after Dad's death. The doubt that had plagued me, that perhaps Margaret was right, that I was an outsider who didn't truly belong, had been replaced by quiet confidence. Not the defensive kind I'd projected when returning to the Azure with Oliver and our evidence folders, but something more substantial, built on 3 years of decisions, innovations, and relationships. Later that evening, after most guests had departed, I found myself standing before a wall of photographs showing Luminous Beauty's evolution through the decades. One image in particular caught my attention. Dad and me at a trade show when I was about 20, both of us laughing as we demonstrated a new product to curious customers. "That was always one of my favorites," said a voice behind me. I turned to find Janet Pierce, my father's former CMO, who had come out of retirement to attend the gala. "I'd forgotten about this one," I admitted. "This was the summer before I moved to New York, wasn't it?" Janet nodded. "Richard was so proud of you that day. You handled the technical questions better than he did." I studied the photo, remembering how natural it had felt to work alongside him, how effortlessly we had complemented each other's strengths. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't left for New York," I mused. "If I'd joined the company right out of college instead." Janet considered this. "You wouldn't be the leader you are today." "You think so?" "I know so," she said firmly. "Those years away gave you perspective Richard never had. He built something wonderful, but he could be myopic. You see the bigger picture because you've stood outside it." Her words resonated with something I'd been feeling but hadn't articulated. The company needed both experiences, I realized. His singular focus to build it, and my broader vision to transform it. "Exactly," Janet smiled. "And speaking of transformation, I saw the blueprints for your innovation campus." Richard would have been floored. The innovation campus was perhaps my boldest move yet. A 15-acre sustainable development that would bring together our research facilities, startup incubator spaces, and a public education center dedicated to ethical beauty science. Construction had begun 3 months ago, with completion targeted for next year. "It's a big investment," I acknowledged. "But if we're going to lead the industry's evolution toward sustainability, we need a physical space that embodies those values." "It's not just a building project," Janet observed. "It's a statement about who Luminous Beauty is becoming under your leadership." As the evening wound down, I found myself back in the museum's quiet rooftop garden with Daniel, overlooking the city lights. The same San Francisco skyline my father had loved, now the backdrop for a company evolving beyond his original vision. "Successful night?" Daniel asked, his arm around my shoulders. "Beyond expectations," I said, though it feels strange to celebrate without him. "He was everywhere tonight," Daniel said gently. "In the stories people told, in the products on display, in the company's DNA. And yet, so much has changed," I mused. "Sometimes I wonder if he'd recognize Luminous Beauty now." "He'd recognize its heart," Daniel said. "The rest is supposed to evolve." We stood in comfortable silence, watching the fog roll in across the Golden Gate Bridge. 3 years ago, standing humiliated in the Azure restaurant, I couldn't have imagined this moment, this sense of peaceful certainty, of knowing exactly where I belonged. The next morning, I arrived at headquarters earlier than usual, energized rather than exhausted by the previous night's celebrations. As I passed through the lobby, I noticed something I'd been too busy to really see lately: a growing wall displaying the community impact projects Luminous Beauty had initiated or supported over the past 3 years. There were photos of our scholarship recipients in their university labs, images of the women-led startups we'd funded, documentation of our partnership with an indigenous cooperative that sustainably harvested key ingredients for our newest line. Each project represented not just corporate social responsibility, but a genuine extension of our values. In my office, I found a small package waiting on my desk with a sticky note from my assistant. This arrived yesterday for the anniversary. Inside was a vintage Luminous Beauty moisturizer jar from the company's first year, accompanied by a handwritten note. "Found this in a box of Mom's things. Thought it belonged in your company museum. S." The S wasn't Sophia, but Stephen, my stepbrother from my mother's second marriage, whom I rarely saw. The gesture, small but meaningful, reminded me how far the ripples of Dad's work had spread, touching lives in ways he never could have anticipated. I placed the vintage jar on my shelf beside the modern version of the same product, the formulation, improved but still recognizably evolved from Dad's original vision. The juxtaposition seemed like a perfect metaphor for luminous beauty itself. My morning calendar showed a meeting with our research team about a breakthrough in waterless formulations, followed by a video call with potential retail partners in TI, Scandinavia. The work continued, each day building on the foundation Dad had created but carrying it forward in directions uniquely mine. 3 years ago, I had stood trembling in a restaurant, publicly accused of stealing something that was rightfully mine. Today, I understood that ownership isn't conferred by wills or legal documents. It's something you claim through vision, work, and purpose. Luminous beauty wasn't something I had inherited or stolen. It was something I continued to earn, day by day, decision by decision. The journey from that night to this morning had transformed not just the company but me. The woman who had fled in tears from Margaret's accusations had become someone who could stand proudly before the industry and articulate a vision that extended far beyond what either Margaret or my father had imagined for luminous beauty, and perhaps that was the greatest legacy Dad had left me. Not just a company to run, but the space to become the leader I was meant to be. Not his replacement, but his succession. Not the keeper of his dream, but the creator of my own. 5 years have passed since Margaret's birthday dinner ambush. Luminous beauty has not only survived, but thrived beyond what anyone in the industry could have predicted. Our innovation campus, completed 2 years ago, has become a beacon for sustainable beauty practices, drawing visitors from around the world eager to learn about our approach to ethical formulation and responsible manufacturing. Last week, I was preparing for an important board meeting when my assistant knocked on my office door with an unusual expression on her face. "Alexandra, there's someone here to see you," she said hesitantly. "She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent." "Who is it?" I asked, glancing at my calendar. My assistant took a deep breath. "It's Margaret." I felt a momentary tightness in my chest, a muscle memory from years of conflict. But it passed quickly, replaced by calm curiosity. "Send her in," I said. Margaret entered my office with none of the commanding presence I remembered. She looked older, of course, we all did, but there was something else different about her. The carefully maintained facade of perfection had faded. Her designer outfit, while still expensive, lacked the meticulous coordination she had once been known for. "Alexandra," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "Thank you for seeing me." I gestured to the seating area by the window, no longer keeping her at arm's length across my desk. "What brings you here, Margaret?" She sat carefully, placing her handbag beside her. "I've been following your success in the press. The innovation campus, the sustainability initiatives. Luminous beauty has become quite remarkable under your leadership." I waited, knowing there must be more to this unexpected visit than belated acknowledgement of my achievements. "I owe you an apology," she finally said, the words clearly difficult for her. "What I did at that birthday dinner was unforgivable. I've had a lot of time to reflect on my actions, especially recently." "Recently?" I prompted. Margaret smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her skirt. "I've had some health challenges this past year. Nothing immediately life-threatening," she added quickly, seeing my expression, "but significant enough to force some perspective." I offered her water, which she accepted with a grateful nod. "I won't pretend we can erase the past," she continued after taking a sip. "But I wanted you to know that I recognize now what your father saw in you. He was right to leave you the company. The admission was something I had once desperately wanted to hear. Now, it was simply a confirmation of what I already knew." "Why tell me this now?" I asked. "Because regret is a terrible companion in one's later years. she said with unexpected candor. And because Sophia speaks of you with such respect these days, it made me realize how wrong I had been. We talked for nearly an hour. Not as family. That bridge had been thoroughly burned, but as two women who shared history, however complicated. Margaret spoke of her life since leaving San Francisco, of failed relationships and humbling financial setbacks. I shared stories of Luminous Beauty's journey, including some of the challenges we'd faced alongside our successes. As she prepared to leave, Margaret paused at the door. "There's one more thing," she said, reaching into her handbag. "I found this while clearing out some storage. I think Richard would want you to have it." She handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a pair of cufflinks with the original Luminous Beauty logo engraved on them, a gift I had helped Dad select for his first major retail partnership celebration when I was just a teenager. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by the gesture. Margaret nodded. "I won't intrude on your life again, Alexandra. I just needed to say these things before it was too late." After she left, I sat at my desk, turning the cufflinks over in my hand. 5 years ago, I might have analyzed Margaret's visit for hidden agendas or manipulation. Now, I could accept it simply for what it appeared to be, an aging woman's attempt to make peace with her past. I placed the cufflinks in my desk drawer and returned to preparing for my board meeting, where we would be discussing the most significant decision in Luminous Beauty's history since my father's succession plan. The following morning, I gathered with Luminous Beauty's executive team in our boardroom. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the innovation campus stretched before us, a physical manifestation of how far we'd come. "As you all know," I began, "we've received an acquisition offer from Mondial Beauty Group. Their proposal values Luminous Beauty at $1.2 billion, about 3 times what analysts predicted we would be worth 5 years ago." Oliver, still our legal counsel and now a board member, nodded appreciatively. Sophia, who had earned her seat at this table through dedication and insight, leaned forward with interest. "It's a generous offer," I continued, "with substantial provisions for maintaining our operational independence, protecting our sustainable practices, and retaining our key personnel." I glanced around the table at the team we'd built, a diverse group of executives who shared our vision for ethical beauty innovation. Some had been with the company since my father's time. Others I had recruited personally. All were watching me intently. "However," I said, placing my tablet on the table, "after careful consideration and consultation with each of you individually, I've decided to decline Mondial's offer." There were nods around the table. This wasn't a surprise to them. We had discussed the possibility extensively over the past month. Luminous Beauty was founded as an independent company with a singular vision, I explained. While Mondial claims to respect that vision, their corporate history suggests otherwise. The 5 companies they've acquired over the past decade have all gradually lost their distinctive character and ethical commitments. I pulled up our strategic plan on the large display. Instead, I'm proposing we pursue the expansion strategy we've developed internally. It's more challenging but allows us to maintain complete control over our practices and principles. For the next hour, we discussed the details of this alternative path, new markets we would enter independently, research initiatives we would fund, community partnerships we would deepen. It was an ambitious plan, but one that preserved the essence of what Luminous Beauty had become under my leadership. As the meeting concluded, Janet Pierce, who had returned from retirement to serve on our board, lingered behind. "You know," she said with a smile, "turning down $1 billion offer takes courage. Most executives would have taken the money and run." I shook my head. "It's not about the money. It never has been." "Exactly," Janet nodded. "That's why Richard chose you. He built this company to create something meaningful, not just to sell it to the highest bidder." We walked together through the campus grounds, passing the research labs where our scientists were developing new waterless formulations. that would reduce shipping weight and environmental impact. Near the education center, a group of chemistry students was touring our facilities as part of the scholarship program we'd established. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Margaret had succeeded that night?" Janet asked. "If she had turned the industry against you?" The question caught me off guard. It had been years since I'd considered that alternative timeline. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but I think the outcome would have been the same eventually, just with a more difficult path. Dad knew what he was doing when he chose me." "He certainly did," Janet agreed, "though I doubt even he could have envisioned all this." She gestured to the thriving campus around us. That evening, I shared the news about declining the acquisition offer with Daniel over dinner in our home overlooking the bay. After 5 years together, he had become not just my partner, but my most trusted sounding board. "Are you having any second thoughts?" he asked as we lingered over dessert. I considered the question seriously. No, accepting would have been easier in some ways. A neat conclusion to the story, I suppose. Daughter defends her right to company, builds it up, sells it for huge profit. But that's not the story I'm interested in telling. Daniel smiled. "What story are you telling then?" "One about creating something lasting," I said. "About building on a foundation while constantly reimagining what could be built. About proving that ethical business isn't just a marketing angle, but a sustainable model for success." Later that night, I found myself thinking about Margaret's unexpected visit. Her attempt at reconciliation had come too late for us to rebuild any meaningful relationship, but it had provided a kind of closure I hadn't realized I still needed. The next morning, I arrived at the office early to find Sophia already there, reviewing consumer feedback on our newest product line. "You're here early," I observed. She looked up with a smile. "Big launch next month. I want to make sure we've addressed all the feedback from the focus groups." I couldn't help but marvel at the transformation in my stepsister, from the entitled young woman who had stood beside Margaret as she publicly accused me of theft, to this dedicated professional who had earned respect on her own merits. "I saw my mother yesterday," Sophia said casually, returning to her tablet. "She mentioned, she came to see you." "She did," I confirmed, curious about Sophia's reaction. "Was it okay?" Sophia asked, a hint of concern in her voice. "It was fine," I assured her. "Actually, it was better than I expected. She seemed different." Sophia nodded. "Her health scare changed something in her. She's been trying to make amends with various people." "Including you?" I asked gently. "We're working on it," Sophia said with a small shrug. "It's complicated. Family usually is," I agreed. We shared a moment of understanding. Two women who had moved beyond the roles our parents had envisioned for us, forging our own paths while carrying forward the best parts of our inheritance. Later that day, I gave an interview to a business magazine about our decision to remain independent despite the lucrative acquisition offer. The journalist seemed particularly interested in the personal story behind Luminous Beauty's success. 5 years ago, there was quite a public scene at your stepmother's birthday dinner," she noted. "She accused you of manipulating your father to gain control of the company. Looking back, how did that moment shape your leadership journey?" I considered the question carefully. "That night was painful, but ultimately clarifying," I replied. "When you're publicly challenged about your right to be somewhere, you have 2 choices: retreat or prove beyond any doubt that you belong there. I chose the latter, and in doing so, discovered strengths I didn't know I had." "And now?" the journalist prompted. "After building Luminous Beauty into a company worth over $1 billion, do you feel you've proven your legitimacy?" I smiled at the question. The interesting thing about success is that eventually you realize you're no longer trying to prove anything to others. You're simply pursuing your own vision because it matters to you. That's where I am now, building something I believe in, surrounded by people who share that belief. As the journalist prepared to leave, she asked one, Final question. What would you say to your father if he could see luminous beauty today? The answer came easily. I'd thank him, not just for leaving me the company, but for believing I could transform it into something even he hadn't imagined. And then I'd show him around our innovation campus and watch his eyes light up at what we've created. 5 years after that fateful night at the Azure, the woman who had stood trembling before her accusers was gone, replaced by someone who no longer needed external validation to know her worth. The company that had once been the source of such bitter conflict had become the platform for innovation and impact far beyond its original scope. And the legacy that Margaret had once claimed I stole had become something no one could take away. Because I hadn't just inherited it, I had reimagined it, expanded it, and made it undeniably mine. 10 years have passed since that fateful night at the Azure when Margaret publicly accused me of stealing luminous beauty. A decade of growth, challenges, triumphs, and transformation that has taken both the company and me in directions neither my father nor I could have imagined. Today is a milestone that feels appropriate for reflection. This morning, I officially announced my decision to step back from the CEO position of Luminous Beauty and transition to chairperson of the board. After a meticulous 2-year search and succession planning process, we've selected Dr. Maya Patel, our brilliant Chief Innovation Officer, to take the helm. The press conference was held in the grand atrium of our innovation campus, now expanded to include a second research facility focused entirely on bioregenerative ingredients. Journalists, industry leaders, employees, and partners gathered to hear the announcement that had been carefully kept under wraps until today. 10 years ago, I stood in a very different room, facing accusations that I didn't deserve to lead this company, I told the assembled crowd, acknowledging the past that had shaped us. Today, I stand before you making a choice that reflects both Luminous Beauty's strength and my vision for its future. I glanced at Maya, standing confidently nearby. At 42, she represented the perfect blend of scientific expertise and business acumen that Luminous Beauty needed for its next chapter. Her background in biochemistry, combined with her genuine passion for ethical beauty, made her the ideal successor. Leadership isn't about holding on to power, I continued. It's about recognizing when new perspective and energy will propel your vision forward. Dr. Patel has been instrumental in developing our most innovative product lines and sustainability initiatives. She understands not just what Luminous Beauty is, but what it can become. After the formal announcement, we mingled with attendees in the campus gardens. The company that Dad had started in our garage now employed over 800 people across 3 continents. Our sustainable practices had been adopted by competitors, creating industry-wide change that went far beyond our own product lines. Oliver Chen, now semi-retired but still a trusted advisor, approached with a glass of champagne. Richard would be speechless, he said, gesturing around at what we'd built. From moisturizer in a garage to all this. Sometimes I can hardly believe it myself, I admitted. Are you having any second thoughts? He asked quietly. I shook my head. None. It's the right time, and Maya is the right person. This transition is as much a part of my leadership as any decision I've made as CEO. Oliver nodded approvingly. The mark of a great leader isn't just what they build, but how well it continues without them. As the celebration continued, I spotted Sophia across the garden, deep in conversation with our international marketing team. Now our global brand ambassador, she had found her perfect role, utilizing her social connections and aesthetic sensibility to represent Luminous Beauty worldwide. Our professional relationship had evolved into a genuine friendship over the years, something neither of us could have predicted during those tense early days. Later that afternoon, after most guests had departed, I gave Maya a tour of my office, which would soon be hers. I still can't believe how this all started, she said, as I showed her the special cabinet where I kept the most meaningful artifacts from Luminous Beauty's history. That your stepmother actually accused you of stealing the company at her birthday. Dinner? I smiled, taking out the vintage moisturizer jar that had been our first product. It's become something of a company legend, hasn't it? New employees probably think it's a myth. But it shaped everything that came after, Maya observed. Would you have transformed luminous beauty so dramatically if you hadn't had to fight? For at first? It was a profound question, one I'd contemplated often over the years. Probably not, I acknowledged. When you have to publicly prove your right to lead, you don't just maintain the status quo. You build something that makes your leadership undeniable. I handed Maya the jar. This is where we started. Where you take it next is up to you. She accepted it carefully, understanding the symbolism of the moment. I won't let you down. I know you won't, I assured her. But remember, your job isn't to be my echo. It's to be your own voice. That evening, Daniel and I hosted a small dinner at our home for the executive team and their partners. After a decade together, we had married 5 years ago in a simple ceremony at a vineyard north of the city. 2 years later, we welcomed our daughter, Eliza, named after my grandmother. As our guests enjoyed dinner on the terrace overlooking the bay, I slipped away to check on Eliza, who was supposed to be asleep but was predictably still awake, reading with a flashlight under her covers. Busted, I said from the doorway. She grinned, entirely unrepentant. Is Dr. Maya going to be the boss now? She asked, putting her book aside. Yes, starting next month, I confirmed, sitting on the edge of her bed. But I'll still be working with the company, just in a different way. Will you be home more? She asked hopefully. Yes, I promised. Much more. This was the other reason behind my decision. The increasing pull I felt toward family life after years of putting the company first. Daniel had been endlessly supportive of my career, but as Eliza grew, I found myself unwilling to miss the moments that my own father had often sacrificed to build his business. After tucking Eliza in properly, I rejoined our guests as dessert was being served. Maya was regaling the table with the story of her first meeting with my father, years before I took over the company. He rejected my ingredient proposal 3 times, she laughed. But he told me to keep refining it because I was almost on to something. That persistence shaped my entire approach to innovation. He had a gift for seeing potential, I agreed, in formulations and in people. As the evening wound down, Sophia lingered after the others had left. We sat in the living room with glasses of wine, reminiscing about the decade we'd navigated together. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Mom had succeeded that night? She asked, echoing the question Janet had posed years earlier. Sometimes, I admitted. But I think we would have found our way to something like this eventually. Maybe not as quickly or directly, but the foundation was always there. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. I was such a brat back then, she said with a self-deprecating smile, following Mom's lead without questioning anything. We were both products of our environments, I said generously. The important thing is how we've grown since then. She raised her glass. To growth, and to whatever comes next. After Sophia left, I stood at the window watching the lights of San Francisco shimmer across the bay. The same view that had captivated my father decades ago still held its magic. Daniel joined me, wrapping his arms around my waist. Penny for your thoughts? Just taking it all in, I said. 10 years ago, I couldn't have imagined this moment. You ready for the next chapter? He asked. I turned to face him. More than ready. The Richard Winters Foundation is expanding its focus to support women entrepreneurs across all industries, not just beauty. I'll be working with universities to develop ethical business curricula. And most importantly, I'll be present for more bedtime stories and school events. Eliza will love that. Daniel smiled. She's already telling everyone her mom is going to teach her how to be a boss someday. I laughed. Well, that's certainly a legacy worth passing on. 3 weeks later, on my final day as CEO, I arrived at the office early. The building was quiet, most employees not yet arrived. I wanted these last moments in the role to be private. A personal transition rather than a public one. I walked through the research labs where we had developed formulations that transformed the industry. I visited the Sustainability Center where we had pioneered packaging solutions now used by companies worldwide. I ended my tour in the original garage lab, preserved as a museum piece within our modern facility. Here, surrounded by my father's original equipment, I felt the full circle of our journey, from his solo experiments mixing ingredients by hand to our international enterprise employing hundreds of scientists, from a single moisturizer to hundreds of products, from one man's vision to an enduring institution. On my desk, I found a package, wrapped in simple brown paper. Inside was a beautifully bound leather journal with a note from Maya. For your next chapter. With gratitude for all you've built and all you've taught me. I ran my fingers over the embossed cover, thinking about what I might fill these pages with. Perhaps the book about ethical business leadership I'd been considering writing. Or maybe the children's story about a girl who turns her father's small workshop into a global force for good, the one I'd been telling Eliza at bedtime. At precisely 9 a.m., I welcomed Maya into what would now be her office. We had planned this transition meticulously, with overlapping responsibilities for the past 6 months to ensure continuity. "Any last-minute advice?" she asked as we stood together by the window overlooking the campus. I considered the question carefully. Trust your instincts. Listen more than you speak. Remember that every decision affects real people's lives. And never forget that luminous beauty exists to make people feel better in their own skin. Both. Literally through our products and figuratively through our practices. She nodded, taking in my words. And what about you? What's your first act as non-CEO? I smiled. I'm picking up Eliza from school today. We're going to bake cookies and talk about her science project. That sounds perfect, Maya said. At 10:60 a.m., we held a small ceremony with the executive team. I handed Maya a symbolic key to the company, a tradition my father had started when he gave me my first official role decades ago. Luminous beauty is in your hands now, I said. Lead it, with wisdom, compassion, and vision. As I walked out of the building, employees lined the hallway, applauding. Many had been with us since my father's time. Others had joined during my tenure. Each represented a life touched by the decisions we had made, the culture we had built, the values we had upheld. Outside, Daniel waited beside our car, ready to begin this new chapter together. As we drove away, I glanced back at the luminous beauty sign, the logo my father had designed now modernized but still recognizable. 10 years ago, standing humiliated in the Azure restaurant as Margaret publicly accused me of theft, I couldn't have imagined this moment. The journey from that night of defensiveness and doubt to this day of confident transition had been longer and richer than I could have anticipated. The company Margaret had claimed I stole had become something far greater than what had been at stake that night, and I had become someone who no longer needed to prove my right to be there. Someone who could choose to leave on my own terms, secure in the knowledge that what I had built would continue to thrive. As we drove toward Eliza's school, I realized that the true inheritance my father had left me wasn't luminous beauty itself. It was the courage to envision something better, the determination to create it, and the wisdom to know when to let others carry it forward. Some legacies aren't stolen or even earned. They're cultivated, expanded, and then entrusted to new hands, becoming something that transcends any single person's ownership. In letting go, I had completed the journey that began on that painful night a decade ago, transforming a moment of humiliation into a lifetime of purpose. Ready? Daniel asked, as we pulled up to Eliza's school. I smiled, stepping confidently toward this new beginning. Absolutely. 15 years have passed since that night at the Azure. The young woman who stood trembling as her stepmother publicly accused her of theft is now Dr. Alexandra Winters Chen, recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Global Beauty Industry Association. Tonight's gala is being held at the Grand, San Francisco's newest and most prestigious hotel. The irony isn't lost on me that this celebration is taking place just 3 blocks from the Azure, where my journey truly began. Sometimes life has a poetic symmetry that you couldn't script if you tried. As I prepare to take the stage and accept this honor, I find myself in a quiet moment of reflection in the venue's elegant preparation room. My speech notes sit before me, but my thoughts are on the winding path that led here. 5 years have passed since I stepped down as CEO of Luminous Beauty. Under Maya's leadership, the company has continued to thrive and innovate. Our market capitalization has doubled, our sustainability initiatives have become the industry standard, and the corporate culture we built remains intact. The transition was so successful that business schools now use it as a case study in succession planning. My own life has evolved in deeply fulfilling ways. The Richard Winters Foundation has expanded globally, supporting women entrepreneurs in 27 countries. The ethical business curriculum I developed with Stanford is now taught in universities worldwide. My book on values-driven leadership became an unexpected bestseller, translated into 14 languages. But my greatest joy has been the time with my family. Eliza is now 12, a curious and confident young woman with her grandfather's analytical mind and her father's gentle heart. Daniel and I welcomed our son, Thomas, 3 years ago. A surprise late addition who has brought immeasurable delight to our lives. A knock at the door interrupts my thoughts. It's Sophia, elegant in a midnight blue gown, still serving as Luminous Beauty's global brand ambassador, but now also running her own successful consulting firm. "Car's here," she says. "Ready for your victory lap?" I smile at her choice of words. "Is that what this is?" "Absolutely," she nods, adjusting my necklace slightly. From public humiliation to industry icon in 15 years. If that's not a victory lap, I don't know what is. We've developed a genuine friendship over the years, the kind neither of us could have imagined during those early contentious days. Sometimes the strongest bonds form from the most unlikely beginnings. "Have you heard from your mother?" I ask as we gather my things. Sophia's expression softens. She's doing better. The treatment seems to be working. Margaret had been diagnosed with breast cancer last year, a battle she was fighting with characteristic determination. Despite our complicated history, I had reached out when I heard the news, offering support through the Foundation's wellness program for cancer patients. "I'm glad," I say sincerely. Time and perspective have a way of softening even the hardest edges of old conflicts. As we make our way through the hotel's grand corridors, I spot Oliver waiting near the entrance to the ballroom. Now in his 70s, he moves a bit slower, but still carries himself with the same dignified presence. "There she is," he says warmly, embracing me. "The woman of the hour." "Just don't tell them about the time I spilled coffee all over those contract revisions," I joke. "Your secret is safe with me," he winks, offering his arm to escort me inside. The ballroom is magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, elaborate floral arrangements, and nearly 500 guests representing every facet of the global beauty industry. As I enter, the crowd rises in a standing ovation that takes my breath away. At our table sit the people who matter most, Daniel and Eliza, Thomas being too young for such a late event, Maya and her husband, Janet Pierce, who has become almost a surrogate mother to me over the years, and several key colleagues from both Luminous Beauty and the Foundation. Eliza leans over as I take my seat. "Mom, there are so many people here," she whispers, wide-eyed. "All to celebrate your mother's extraordinary impact on this industry," Daniel adds, squeezing my hand. After dinner, the association's president approaches the podium to introduce me. Dr. Victoria Meadows has been a friend and occasional competitor. Throughout my career, our companies often vying for the same sustainability awards and innovation recognitions. 15 years ago, she begins, the beauty industry witnessed something unusual. A public challenge to a new leader's legitimacy that could have derailed a promising career before it truly began. My heart beats faster at the direct reference to that night at the Azure. It's not something often discussed so openly in industry circles anymore. What happened next has become legendary, Victoria continues. Instead of retreating, Alexandra Winters returned to face her accusers with irrefutable evidence of her qualifications and her father's wishes. But that single act of courage, while impressive, is not why we honor her tonight. Victoria gestures toward me. We celebrate Dr. Winters Chen because of what she built after that moment. A company that revolutionized sustainable practices in our industry. A foundation that has launched over 300 women-owned businesses. And a leadership philosophy that has transformed how we think about ethical business. The room erupts in applause as I'm invited to the stage. As I walk up the steps, I glance back at my family. Daniel's proud smile, Eliza's enthusiastic clapping. These are the true achievements that no award could ever measure. I accept the crystal sculpture, its weight substantial in my hands. Much, like the responsibility I had carried for so many years. Thank you, I begin, setting the award aside to address the room. 15 years ago, I stood in a restaurant not far from here, facing one of the most humiliating moments of my life. My stepmother publicly accused me of manipulating my father to gain control of Luminous Beauty, a company I had loved since childhood but never expected to lead. The room is silent, hundreds of industry leaders leaning forward slightly to catch every word. That night changed me in ways I couldn't have anticipated. When you're forced to defend your right to be somewhere, you don't just prove you belong, you redefine what belonging means. I pause, letting my gaze travel across the faces watching me. Luminous Beauty was never just a company to me. It was my father's legacy, yes, but it also became the canvas on which I could paint a new vision of what the beauty industry could be. Ethical, sustainable, genuinely empowering. I speak about the milestones, the innovation campus, the sustainable packaging revolution, the inclusive formulations for all skin types and tones, the ethical sourcing partnerships with indigenous communities. But I also acknowledge the struggles, the resistance to change, the financial risks of our sustainability commitments, the personal cost of those early years of 16-hour workdays. Leadership isn't about titles or control, I continue. It's about service to your customers, your employees, your community, and ultimately to a vision larger than yourself. The greatest leaders understand that their most important act might be stepping aside when the time is right, making space for new perspectives and fresh energy. I glance at Maya, who nods subtly in acknowledgement. 5 years ago, I made the decision to transition from CEO to chairperson, and eventually to step away from day-to-day operations entirely. Some called it premature, others called it visionary. I simply called it right. Right for me, right for the company, right for the future we were building. As I near the conclusion of my speech, I find myself thinking of my father. How proud he would be, not just of what Luminous Beauty had become, but of the leader and person I had become. I accept this honor tonight with deep gratitude, but also with the understanding that no achievement stands alone. We are all products of those who believed in us, challenged us, supported us, and yes, sometimes even those who doubted us. Raise my glass in a toast to the future of this industry we love. May it continue to evolve with conscience, creativity, and courage. The applause is thunderous as I return to my seat. Daniel embraces me, whispering, "That was perfect." The next morning, I receive an unexpected message. Margaret has sent flowers to our home with a simple note. "Congratulations on your well-deserved recognition. Richard would be proud." It's a small gesture but meaningful in its acknowledgement of a truth that took 15 years to articulate, that my father had been right all along, not just about my capabilities but about his vision for Luminous Beauty's future. Later that week, I visit the company headquarters for a quarterly board meeting. Though I no longer maintain an office there, I'm always welcomed warmly. Employees who weren't even born when I took over the company greet me by name as I walk through the corridors. Maya meets me in the lobby, her leadership style distinct from mine but equally effective. Under her guidance, Luminous Beauty has expanded into wellness technology while maintaining its core commitment to ethical beauty products. The R&D team has something they want to show you, she says with a mysterious smile, leading me to the research wing. There, the scientists unveil their latest innovation, a revolutionary biodegradable packaging system that dissolves completely after use, leaving no trace of environmental impact. They've named it the Alexandra system in my honor. We built on the foundation you created, the lead researcher explains, but took it in a direction even you might not have imagined. I'm deeply touched by the gesture and even more by the innovation itself. Exactly the kind of forward thinking I had always hoped to inspire. After the board meeting, I take a detour before leaving, visiting the company museum that chronicles Luminous Beauty's history. The displays begin with my father's original formulations and continue through the decades of growth and transformation. There, in a glass case midway through the exhibit, is a small but significant addition I hadn't seen before. The invitation to Margaret's 50th birthday dinner, preserved alongside a brief, factual description of what transpired that night and how it catalyzed the company's renaissance under my leadership. Seeing this painful moment acknowledged as a pivotal part of our corporate history brings an unexpected sense of completion. The hurt and humiliation of that night have been transformed into simply one chapter in a much larger, richer story. That evening, as I help Eliza with her science project at our dining room table while Thomas plays nearby and Daniel prepares dinner, I feel a profound sense of peace. The journey that began with such pain 15 years ago has led to this moment of quiet joy and purpose. Later, as the children sleep, Daniel and I sit on our terrace overlooking the lights of San Francisco. The same view that captivated my father decades ago now frames our own family story. I got a call today, I tell him, sipping my tea. The governor wants me to chair the state's new commission on ethical business practices. Daniel smiles. Are you going to accept? I consider the question. I think so. It's important work, and I can structure it around our family time. You've come a long way from defending your right to run a company, he observes. Now they're asking you to help shape how all companies should operate. The observation strikes me as profound in its simplicity. The woman who once stood trembling before her accusers now stands before governors and industry leaders as an authority on ethical leadership. The painful moment that could have defined me has instead become merely the prologue to a story I've written on my own terms. When I look back at that night, I say quietly, I almost want to thank Margaret. Without that public challenge, I might have led Luminous Beauty exactly as my father had, competently but cautiously. Being forced to prove myself pushed me to reimagine what the company could be. Daniel nods thoughtfully. Sometimes our greatest growth comes from our deepest wounds. As we sit in comfortable silence, watching the fog roll in across the Golden Gate Bridge, I reflect on the full circle of this journey. From the frightened woman fleeing a restaurant in tears to someone who has found her voice and purpose. From defending a legacy to creating one entirely my own. The stepdaughter who publicly accused me of theft 15 years ago inadvertently gave me the greatest gift, the opportunity to prove beyond any doubt that I wasn't just worthy of my inheritance. I was capable of transforming it into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. Some legacies aren't stolen. Some aren't merely preserved. The most meaningful ones are reimagined, expanded, and ultimately transcended, becoming not Just a continuation of someone else's story, but the beginning of your own. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.